Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. My name is Lila Anderson, and I'm the educator of visual literacy and learning here at University Museums. So I coordinate the programming, and we're so glad to see all of you here today. I'm delighted to introduce to you Sarah Bartlett. Sarah is a senior here at Iowa State. She studies anthropology, political science, and classical studies. She is an ambassador for the World Languages and Cultures Department. She has studied Japanese and is now studying Italian, which I love because I'm also an Italian speaker. She is our first, she's worked with University Museums for quite a while. She served as an intern for us for 2 years, and she is now our first Pohlman Fellow. So she just started that in the last semester, and she's been worked really hard on this exhibition, Contemplate Japan. She did a lot of research for the exhibition, as well as collaborated with Lynette Pohlman on our curatorial decision making, and is a really knowledgeable in this area in the exhibition. I wanted to mention too, she studied Japanese for about 5 years before her journey at Iowa State, did a homestay there, and so really has a lot of both personal as well as professional research experience that she can bring to the talk. So please help me in giving a warm welcome to Sarah Bartlett.
Hello. So I'm going to start off by talking about these two displays here that correlate to some of the Japanese festivals that are celebrated in Japan. So there's estimated to be about 200,000 festivals celebrated a year in Japan. Some are regional festivals, some are national festivals. Some families celebrate more specific festivals, some just celebrate the general festivals. But one of these festivals is Hinamatsuri, which is also known as Girls' Day, and it's known as the Doll Festival. And it's one of 5 festivals called the 5 Sekku, which are seasonal festivals that were brought over to Japan from China they were first celebrated during the Heian period in China, which was about 794 to 1185. So these festivals are known in Japanese as the Go Sekku. So Go meaning 5, Sekku again is those seasonal festivals. So the dates of these festivals were auspicious and thought to bring good fortune. So the first one happens on the first day of the first month. The next one is Hinamatsuri, which is the 3rd day of the 3rd month, and then they go on like that. Hinamatsuri, like I said, is celebrated on March 3rd. It's sometimes called Momo no Saku because at this time during the year, peach blossoms are in full bloom. And peaches also symbolize longevity and marriage, which is one of the common themes for this festival. Contrary to popular belief, a lot of people think that Hina means doll because this is known as the Doll Festival, so they think it's a direct translation. Hina actually means baby bird. In this situation, Hina is just referring to the little figurines that started off this festival. So the goal of this festival is to pray for young girls in the family. They want continued health and happiness for them throughout their lifetime. And it started with paper dolls called hitogata, and they were supposed to hold all of the bad omens, and they were placed in little boats and floated up the river away from the village. And so they were carrying away all of the bad spirits from the village. Eventually, children started playing with these dolls, and the play was called Hina Asobi. But once children started playing with the dolls, the usage and the significance of the dolls shifted, because obviously you can't have children playing with the things that are supposed to hold all of the bad spirits and the bad omens. So the significance shifted for these dolls, and they began to be displayed instead of sent up the river. So that's kind of how we get this modern doll display that we see here. So some cities have monumental doll displays during this time period in their cities. So some have giant pyramids in City Hall that have 35 steps. Some have mountain steps that go up to like mountain hiking trails that they cover with these dolls. It's kind of a big deal in certain cities. Typically, the doll displays that you see in the average home are going to be probably about 7 tiers. That's the typical size of these displays. So some families buy a new set when their first daughter is born. Others pass them down throughout generations in their family. But today, many families only have the Emperor and the Empress because the cost of these doll displays has grown exponentially throughout the years. And now there are certain designers who have kind of dominated the market that are making them and selling them for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So our doll display has the typical 7 tiers, and all the dolls here are dressed in the Heian period, which is typical. It was typical for them to wear a 12-layer kimono, which is very heavy. I got to try one on when I was doing my homestay in Japan, and it's hard to walk around and hard to move in, and very, very warm. So at the top, we have the Emperor and the Empress. The Emperor is called Odari-sama, and the Empress is called Ohina-sama. So in Japanese, it's very common for there to be little additives to the end of names in order to show respect or admiration for someone. So sama is the highest level of respect you can show someone. When I was in Japan, I was Sarah-san. San is just a general term of respect. Men, sometimes you can use san for men as well. Sometimes you use kun for their name. If you think someone's really cute, you can add chan to the end of their name. So it's one of those language things that helps you understand why they're named the way they are. So these two have sama at the end of their name because you want to show them the utmost respect because they are the Emperor and the Empress. On the next tier down, you have the ladies in waiting. Typically there are 3, but in our display, we have 5. So the ladies in waiting are called the Go-nin kanjo. So go, as I said before, means 5. And in Japanese, plurals work differently than they do in the US. So they use counters. Nin is the counter for people. So here, Go-nin kanjo just means there are 5 of the thing that comes afterwards. So 5 kanjo, 5 ladies in waiting. Some of our ladies in waitings look a little odd because when women got married during the Heian period, it was common that they would shave off their eyebrows and paint their teeth black. So these 2 dolls in particular have the shaved eyebrows and black teeth. So we don't really know why they did this. People have speculated why, but people have said that it's maybe to stop affairs from happening because why would you want to have an affair with someone with black teeth? But we don't know. The next tier down are the 5 musicians that are attendants to the court as well. They're called the Gonin Bayashi. So you have one with a taiko drum, and then one with an hourglass drum called an otsutsumi, one with a smaller hourglass drum called a kotsutsumi, and then a singer who's normally holding a fan, and then a flutist on the end there as well. The next tier down has the ministers, which are called daijin. And then underneath them, you have the servants who are called shite. And the bottom 2 tiers are supposed to represent a young girl's dowry. So like I said before, marriage is one of the things that is kind of, you're praying for a good marriage for your daughter in this festival. So with the doll displays showing off the dowry, the things that you would give to your daughter's future husband is also fits into that theme. So displays of this particular type originated in Kyoto. We arranged our display in the Kanto style. This whole exhibit, the Contemplate Japan exhibit, is all about 200 years of Japanese influence on Western arts. And this style shows a little bit of Western influence on Japan. So the emperor is seated on the left, which turns the traditional power dynamic on its head, because typically the person in power sat on the right. So during the Meiji period, Western influence caused the Japanese to reevaluate their power dynamics, and the Kanto region of Japan decided to conform to the Western standards and put the woman on the right in the seat of power. That right there is the typical power dynamic with the emperor on the right and the empress on the left. So as I said, some families cannot afford the doll displays, And there was a practice that arose in the Edo period, which was a time of particular hardship in Japan, so that families could still participate in this festival and bring their young daughters health and happiness. So families would create what are called tsurushi hina, which are mobile-like decorations that were created by stringing together small handmade dolls. These dolls were created by significant women in a young girl's life. So aunts, grandmas, cousins, and neighbors all came together to craft these dolls and make these displays. And they were often seen as more meaningful than the doll displays because they're crafted with all of the love of the significant women in these young girls' lives. Now that, for those who do have the larger displays, or even those who only have the emperor and the empress, now it's common to display these tsurushi hina right next to the dolls. And many cities that I was describing that have the monumental displays, they'll also have many tsurushi hina lining the sides of those displays. So along with bringing the general health and happiness, these are also said to ward off disease, which is another thing that's important when you have a young girl. Japanese festivals also have very specific foods that you're supposed to eat to bring specific health and happiness. The most common food item during this festival is hishimochi. So mochi is like sweet rice cakes. They're not like the rice cakes that you get at like Hy-Vee that are crunchy. It's more soft. It's almost like Turkish delight, but not. The texture is kind of like Turkish delight, but it's not quite the same. And these mochi are made in 3 colors. So the top layer is white, then you have a pink layer and a green layer. They're said to show a transition through the season, so white winter, pink spring, and green summer. And then they can also be symbolic of a young girl's transition into adulthood. The next food item that is common during this festival is chirashi sushi, which is basically just deconstructed sushi. And some good luck items in that sushi is shrimp, lotus root, and beans. There's also hina arare, which is they're little tiny rice cakes that are more close to the texture of the rice cakes you get at Hy-Vee, but they're sweet, they're sugar coated. And supposedly when little girls were playing with the dolls way back when, they were also eating these little hina arare as they played with them. Another thing that you eat during this festival is clam soup. So clams are significant because 2 clam shells from the same clam fit together perfectly. But if you take a shell from one clam and a shell from another clam and try and put them together, they don't fit together. So because of that, they're a symbol of marriage and a healthy and happy marriage, because only 2 pieces from the same clam fit together perfectly. These doll displays are packed up quickly after the end of the day on March 3rd, because if they're left up through the 4th, it's supposedly bad luck, and the daughter of the family is doomed to a late marriage. So these doll displays go up mid-February, and then they have to be packed up on the day of the festival in order for the daughter to not be doomed with a late marriage. So this display here goes along with another one of those seasonal festivals called Tango no Seku. In Asia, this day marked the start of the rainy season in Asia. So it's on the 5th day of the 5th month, which is May 5th. And it used to be called Boys' Day, but now it's called Children's Day, and in Japanese that's Kodomo no Hi. So the reason that it changed from Boys' Day to Children's Day is because Boys' Day, Kodomo no Hi, Tango no Seku, whatever you want to call it, is now a part of Golden Week in Japan. So Emperor Showa's birthday, who's an emperor that they particularly like in Japan, is on April 29th. And there's Constitution Day and Greenery Day on May 3rd and 4th. And so they decided to make Boys' Day a national holiday and make some of the days in between there national holidays as well, to give people in Japan a full week off of work and school. So when it became a national holiday in 1948, it became Children's Day instead of Boys' Day, because Girls' Day was not a national holiday. So historically, the first written record of this festival was in the year 839, but events had been happening on this day for many years before. Like I said, it's one of those go-seku, and it's one of those important days to pray for seasonal health and happiness. In ancient literature, it states that people used to display dolls made of mugwort and grass at the entrance to their homes and drink sweet calamus tea, and they also picked herbs to ward off bad spirits. So at the top of this display, you can see a little bit of what that might have looked like, because the leaves and everything up there are what those calamus and the mugwort leaves look like. This festival occurred right before the summer rice planting season, so again, good luck was vital to survival. During the Heian period, this festival, men wore headdresses with those leaves on them, and doors to the courts were adorned with the calamus and the mugwort. Emperor Shomas declared that no one should enter the court without sweet calamus on their head, and the practice quickly spread throughout the whole country. There were also various athletic activities that occurred on this day during this festival. And during the Edo period, there was an heir that was born at the beginning of the period. So this festival took on new significance because they wanted to pray for that heir's continued health, happiness, and well-being. And it turned into a grand festival during that time period with helmet and spears displayed all over the castle, and common people started to join in. They made paper and wood helmets and other decorations to display in their own homes. And the helmets soon became small dolls, and you start to see the dolls that we see in our display here. Local craftsmen eventually decided to capitalize and started selling displays of this type as well. So there are a lot of stories that go with this day that tell about legendary figures and mythical figures and historical figures that boys should emulate. So there's the legend of Kintaro, who was a little boy who had a lot of strength. And he went into the forest and fought lots of demons and monsters. He wrestled big, strong animals and even wrestled a giant carp. So carp are known to be especially tenacious because they're known to swim upstream. So defeating a giant carp was a big feat for Kintaro, and he eventually grew up to be a samurai. So it's possible that he appears in our display in this doll, but a lot of these figures are changed out. So some displays have certain historical figures, some displays have others, and a lot of these figures have been idealized and changed over time. So it's very hard to distinguish which figure is which. But I'm going to talk about some of the things that we maybe can identify here and talk about some of the popular figures that you might see on displays of this type. So at the top you have ceremonial armor, and then you also have the carp flag. In Japanese, koi is the Japanese word for carp, so koi flag, carp flags, one and the same. And it symbolizes strength and determination because, as I said, they are known to swim upstream. One thing that you'll see a lot in this is a white horse. So this specific white horse is said to be the offspring of a dragon and a mare, which is why it has those hexagonal shapes. I think those are depicting scales. So it's a specific type of horse. And typically, whoever is on that horse is of particular importance. Normally, the white horse carries the emperor. At the top, on tier 2, we can possibly see depictions of Kato Kiyomasa, and he was a general of humble birth from the 1500s, so he's a historical figure, and he was known as the Devil General because of his bravery and many victories. He led expeditions to Korea, and he was famous for spearing tigers, who had been a major issue to the Japanese soldiers because they were preying on their horses. So the tigers were taking out their horses and making their job very difficult. So he led an expedition to kill the tigers and stop them from hurting their horses. Because of that story, he might also be depicted right here on the bottom, spearing this tiger. It doesn't look like a tiger, but it is a tiger. This display was made in 1850. And some of these things look a little different. So he could be up at the top section there, but he could also be down here as well. Next to him, I guess, sorry, not at the top, right there on the third tier, on the left there. Next to him, we know that this man is a general because he's holding a sai-hai, which is that feathery thing that's in his hand. The figure just below him we know is also a general because he is also holding a sai-hai. It's a fabric one and not one made out of hair. But other than that, there's not really a whole lot we can say about those two. They could be general depictions of generals that the young boys are supposed to look up to. They could be specific figures, but like I said, these things have been changed so much over time, it's hard to identify which is which. The next figure is Jimmu Tenno, and he reigned from 660 to 585 BCE. He is often depicted with a straight black beard and holding a hawk. He was the first emperor of Japan and the grandson of the sun goddess, and he is said to be the ancestor of all emperors. So when a battle, he's particularly known for a battle that was not going well, and there was a storm that brought lots of hail and darkness, and through the storm, a hawk appeared at the end of his bow, and it was said to be so dazzling that all of the other soldiers from the other side were so taken aback by this hawk that they were distracted, and he was able to win the battle. So he is depicted here, and I can confidently say that this is Jimmu Tenno, because he is one of the figures that is always depicted in these displays. The next one, who is easier to identify, is Shoki. He was a general in China who committed suicide after failing an exam to become a general. The emperor was so impressed with his loyalty that he threw him a grand funeral. Shoki later appeared to said emperor in a dream and vowed to protect him. He later appeared to the Chinese emperor and led him to victory against demons. He's known as the demon queller, and he's often seen with crazy hair and a crazy hat, and he has a depiction of a demon on his belt. So he is this guy right here. Another one who is potentially on this is Kajiwara. He was a brave warrior fighting for his clan, and he represents kind-heartedness and bravery, which in Japanese is known as Bushido. So he is seen in that depiction right there over on the bottom left there. And he basically just represents the kind of lighthearted courage for your family that they wanted young boys to hold on to. Another figure that often appears on these is Jingu, who is the widowed wife of an emperor who when her husband died, she happened to be pregnant, and she was kind of distraught, and she didn't know what to do because Japan was on the edge of conflict. So she went fishing to look for an omen. She ended up getting the omens that she needed, and so she led the Japanese into battle and gave birth on the battlefield to a son named Ojin. She's often depicted in red and has a fishing pole. So she is potentially this figure here because they've got the red hair and they have lots of red on them. And I believe this is a fishing pole, but it could be something else entirely. And this doll could also be Kagami Jishi, who was a kabuki dancer. Typically that figure has white hair and a lot more elaborate makeup, so it could honestly be either one of these figures. Another one is one of Jingu's elderly councilmen and general. His name was Takenoshi, and he is depicted over there on the left seated. It's not typical to see a lot of older people on these displays, so that is probably a depiction of him. But it could also be something that was put on there to show the wisdom in age. The last person that I'm going to talk about here is Ojin, who is the son of the widowed wife of the emperor. He is often depicted as the god of war after his death, and he's seen as clean-shaven and sitting, and he's often seen wearing the eboshi hat, which is a particularly royal symbol, and that eboshi hat is seen on that figure right there. So it's very possible that he is depicted right there as a child. He's often depicted as a baby on these displays, but the fact that he's riding on the white horse and he has the eboshi hat makes me believe that that is a depiction of him. He can also be depicted possibly at the top here on the left there. The top left there, his clean face and his regal appearance, and the fact that he is displayed at the top of this display looking down on all the others could identify that he is also Ojin, depicted as an older emperor. So these dolls are all supposed to symbolize manliness, bravery, and patriotism to young boys. And today, many families don't think it's good for young boys to model themselves after samurai and warriors. So they don't often display dolls in this way. This doll display is from the 1850s, back when it was a little bit more popular to display these things. But now, many families instead simply display the carp flags. So it's common for these carp flags to be more than 15 feet long. And so they're all displayed on a flagpole outside of the home. The father's is the largest flag, and it's black. Underneath his flag is a red flag. That is the mother's flag. The eldest son gets a blue flag, and all the other children after that get flags of varying sizes and colors, and they're all hung on the flag outside the home. So now, since they don't think that it's particularly great for young boys to model themselves after warriors, this festival has taken on more of a religious connotation, and it's a day for families to take their children to shrines where they are blessed, often in front of monumental flagpoles that have even bigger flags than they have at their home. So on this day, sometimes in the morning before everything happens, and sometimes when they get home from the shrine, boys traditionally bathe in iris-scented water. So iris leaves are shaped like swords, and so they're supposedly bring strength to the young boys on this day. And then after they bathe, after they've come home and taken a bath, or after they've just returned from the temple, the family sits down for a significant meal. So there is symbolic food for this festival as well. There's chi maki, which are rice dumplings that are wrapped in bamboo that are meant to drive away evil. And there's also kashiwa mochi. So again, mochi is that sticky rice cake that's very hard to describe. And this particular rice cake is wrapped in oak leaves. And oak leaves are linked to Shintoism. So again, it's another signifier that this festival has taken on more of a religious connotation than the manliness and bravery that it used to take on. So the last festival I'm going to talk about actually happened yesterday in Japan. It's called Setsuban, and it normally happens on the first Monday in February. So this year that was the third, which was yesterday. Setsuban is another festival that was created to dispel bad spirits, particularly oni. So oni are a specific type of demon or ghost in Japan. And sometimes even their gods are depicted as oni because they bring chaos and darkness. So two gods in Japan that are often depicted as oni are Rijin and Fujin, which are depicted in those two prints over on that wall there. And because they bring chaos, they're often seen as oni, and they're often something that the Japanese want to dispel out of their homes. So it depends on your family how you celebrate this holiday, but in some families, which this is how we used to celebrate it all the time in my Japanese class, someone will put on an oni mask, and the rest of the family will throw beans at them, and they'll yell, "Oni wa soto, fuku wa uchi," which basically means bad spirits get out, good spirits come in. And so the number of beans you throw correlates to the age of the participants. So I'm 21 years old, and so I would throw 21 beans at the oni. You also are supposed to sit down and eat the same number of roasted soybeans plus one. So I would eat 22 roasted soybeans because I want my 22nd year to be full of happiness and health, just as the 21 years before were. They also are supposed to eat a maki sushi roll, a whole maki sushi roll. So maki sushi is just rolled sushi, and a whole roll because if you cut the roll, you're said to be cutting the happiness that you have just wished upon yourself. So you're supposed to eat it, the whole thing, in complete silence while facing a lucky direction. So each year a lucky direction is established. You're supposed to eat it while looking in that lucky direction and then you can talk when you're done. So all of these festivals came about during a time period when sickness was thought to be the result of bad spirits, and when prayer was the only thing you could do to ensure your survival when in the planting season and everything like that. So it was very important to wish for health and happiness and good fortune at all times, and eating specific things to ward off bad spirits and bad luck was important. It's also important to note that calamus leaves are known now to promote good digestive health. So these practices were actually working to make these people more healthy. So it ended up being a good practice in the end. So that is all I have to talk to you guys about. Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
I was curious, did you say that was a Chinese story?
Yes, so these festivals, the Go-Seku, originated in China, and they were traditions that were passed on to the Japanese people. So yeah, he was a Chinese man who, the legend of him, because he's a legendary figure, did originate in China, and he did appear to a Chinese emperor. Yeah.
At what time frame?
Oh goodness, the Heian. Oh yeah, so this was in the Heian period when these were originated. So about 700 AD.
Some of these in the front in the girls' festival look like girls might want to play with them, but I assume that didn't happen.
It's not uncommon for girls to play with them, but it honestly depends on the family. Some families display these in glass cases so you can't move anything. Some families just leave them out like this. And like I said, nowadays it's pretty uncommon to see a display like this in someone's home because either they're antiques and they're super, super fragile, or they never had one passed down in their family, and so they only have the emperor and the empress.
They take a lot of space too.
They do. Most of them aren't nearly this large. Most of them are probably more like this big, so they don't take up quite as much space as our display here.
Do they box those over there also?
Yeah, so these typically aren't displayed at all now. Sometimes they display just the helmet and the armor, but since the festival has switched from Boys' Day to Children's Day, and since Western influences kind of stopped the idealization of samurai and like warrior mentality, they don't really display them. Yes?
Is it desirable to accumulate dolls for families? Is it something they try to do? Is it a sign of prestige or stand?
I would definitely say that having a full display is definitely a sign of wealth for the family, but you wouldn't accumulate like a doll here and a doll there. You would get a full set at once because you want them to match. You want the styles to match, because different artists will make these displays in their own way. So like I said before, particular doll making is like a big industry, and so there are particular artists who make specific dolls in their style that are popular.
So the artists still make dolls.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes families will make doll sets of their own as well, if they can't afford the big sets. Which is almost more of a connection to the ancient tradition anyway, because they were making the handmade dolls at the beginning.
So as a collection, would these have been purchased together?
Yes.
So that they did match?
Yes, so they would have been, purchased together. So this is from the 1850s, but Anne Bernier acquired it in the 1950s along with this doll display. So this doll display, I believe, is from the 1950s, but this one was almost 100 years old when she got it.
And it was sold as a
Mm-hmm.
collection.
All right, well, if no one else has any questions.
Thank you all for coming. Let's thank Sarah.
Okay.